Hello and welcome to a Smurd P video, and today I'm generally quite excited because we're starting to see some of the Krakoa era, and I really am pleased that it's being released in this format because this is probably how I wanted it to release. Not everybody's gonna want it released this way, but this is how I wanted it to be released. So Dawn of X Omnibus Volume 1, and there will be obviously 2, and that closes Dawn of X. And then I think, is it Reign of X, if I remember correctly, and so forth until we get to the Fall of X. So I think is that there's probably 4 sections, if I remember correctly. I could be completely wrong. So anyway, this is how it was sort of displayed in terms of when they were releasing the graphic novels. It was this sort of idea on the front. So you got all the team that are involved with this: Hickman, you, Dugan, Lolly, Percy, Cassara, Kubert, Howard, and so forth and so forth. So I'm quite happy because we're getting quite a lot of the Krakoa era now. The weird thing of this is, so we got the Fall of the X Omnibus, which I haven't reviewed yet, which is more like an event omnibus. We've had the Sabretooth War. We've also had previous releases, which is just X-Men by Hickman. So that will be collected in these 2 omnibuses. And I can't remember how many more than that because we've got only sort of 21 issues. So there are lots of ways to collect this by the end of it, because I think with the earlier days, perhaps it makes sense to read it like this. But then when you get out of the initials of the Krakoa era, books start being their own entities and their own storylines, and you're perhaps going to be in and out constantly if you're reading it like this. So it may not work. So, but, up to you how you want to read it. I love this side. I think this is quite nice. Age of Krakoa on there. Of course, my light happens to be shining in there. You got Age of Krakoa in there. Nice shiny Marvel Omnibus there. Some Krakoa right in there. And my biggest disappointment with this whole Omnibus is it did not have House of X, Powers of X included, because that would have made this Krakoa perfect. But of course, they've re-released that. That's due out in November, if I remember correctly. And I did have that once upon a time. I sold that when I was selling a lot of my hardcovers because they stopped doing those, which is really annoying. Then I was going to try and get some of the paperbacks, and then they stopped doing those after, I think, Reign of X or whatever. So I'm hoping that this is going to be over the next few years. We get a good omnibus once a year, and we can build our Krakoa era quite nice without waiting a million years. Because as an X-Men fan, I've been collecting for a long time omnibuses. Sometimes it is painful, but, we're almost nearly done with the 90s, which is fantastic, and then hopefully they focus on the zeros and then the dismal period between 2010 and 2019 before, which can be quite painful. So what does this collect? This collects X-Men 1 to 7, X-Force 1 to 8, Marauders 1 to 8, Excalibur 1 to 8, Fallen Angels, which has not been in oversized form before, 1 to 6, New Mutants, once again, not collected in the oversized format. I actually expected an omnibus to be just released because they kept that sort of at side length, and that was one of the biggest runs, 1 to 7. Wolverine 1 to 3, which I'm glad of, because when I first saw this, it didn't tally up that Wolverine was getting enough love. And we know that in X of Swords, there's a couple of issues in there. So I'm hoping that's all covered and not lost, because even though Wolverine, you could easily do a Wolverine X-Force omnibus on its own quite nicely without it affecting any of this. I'm glad it's in there. And then we got Giant X-Men, Jean Grey and Emma Frost. So very, very nicely. So lifting off the dust cover, I'm not sure what to expect underneath. I have no idea. Oh my goodness. Yes, it is just the boring grey. Maybe I should have actually just gone for the direct market cover, which I would have if it wasn't like 20 quid more. So anyway, the creators, which I've said some of their names, the synthesis, there we go. And if you are new to X-Men and you've decided, damn it, I'm going to read the Krakoa era, buying these is quite a nice way to do this. So got that going around there. And then I will carefully put this on its back and we can have a look inside. So if I've done my maths correctly, this has about 48 issues in here. So this is quite a big book. Now, this is going to be the awkward part. Because it is such a big book, how well am I going to make this flow? That's the interesting part. So in here you have the contents page of who is doing what. I always felt like after Hickman's initial run with X-Men, I always felt a little bit disappointed after that, because Hickman had a vision that he wanted to deliver, and then he stopped writing it. And don't get me wrong, Jerry Dugan did a good job. I enjoyed what he was delivering, but was that how Hickman envisioned it? Has he literally said, this is what I want you to do, but you can write it how you want to write it? So, and then I believe the end, as always, is rushed. That's a little bit disappointing. So I'm actually quite looking forward to revisiting this. Right, let me try and get my camera in the place where it is not going to drive nuts every time I knock it. There we go, that's a little bit better, isn't it? I think I did all right there. I'm still probably going to knock it, so I do apologize. It's a really tight angle. So there are lots of individual stories. I'm trying to get to where an issue ends. Let's see if I can try and do this and see how this flows. All right, here we go. Hopefully this is how it goes. I'm so sorry about this. Right, so New Mutants. So we got issue covers. We got New Mutants. New Mutants 1. And like I said, I have no idea how this is mapped. So that must be... Yeah, and then it's just straight into an X-Men issue. So is it going to do that the whole way through? I have no idea. But I'm quite excited to read this the way they've mapped it. I think the only problem is if you're interested in one particular story, this isn't going to work for you, because you are constantly jumping in. There was a few issues near the beginning where they sort of communicate with each other. So there's a particular issue with X-Force where something happens, and I think that reverberates through other issues and so forth. So until I read this, I'm never going to be able to say whether this works or whether this doesn't work, but I'm still just very excited to have the Krakoa era in Omnibus form. That's what I'm really excited about, because this is nice. And I like the Krakoa era. I really enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. Yeah, so we got Excalibur, and then we've got another Excalibur issue. So it is not just going from issue to issue. There are times where there are 2 issues of Excalibur, for example. So, yeah, the mapping is interesting. So maybe that is just to make sure that you don't fall asleep while reading something else that you're not interested in, when really you want to be reading that next issue of that particular book. I guess that's the only way to look at it. So, yeah, I like this. But I don't think it will be everybody's cup of tea. But from what I'm gathering, I think it sold very, very well. We've obviously got an Omnibus Volume 2 happening. At some point, gently does it. Right, and then I'm just going to carefully lift up this side, because the worry is that I could damage the spine by rushing through this. Yeah, I think these are the bits that used to frustrate me, where there used to be an explanation. That used to frustrate me. So the biggest issue is not having House of X, Powers of X in here. That really, really does irritate me quite a bit. I'm very, very disappointed in that. Completely disappointed in that. That really does irk me quite a bit, because, you know, we should have had it all in one. So you got variant covers in here. Quite a lot of variant covers in here. Even more variant covers in here. I'm surprised that there is not a sort of forward from Hickman. It does make me a little bit disappointed, because I think I would have loved to have heard what his thoughts actually were on his original design. You know, even if it was just a 2-pager, this is what I intended from this. I think we would have greatly appreciated that as fans, in my opinion. But hey, it's done the way it is, and who am I to moan? But those are the extras that we sort of sometimes like to hear. I may feel like actually seeing, there must be some interviews out there with Jonathan Hickman about his X-Men run, and the Krakoa universe, and how he didn't write a majority of it because he jumped up the ladder. Could we have had something different? Was it rushed at the end? I mean, the fall of X was, it was always going to happen, surely. But did it happen in the way that it was meant to happen? Who knows? Anyway, hope you like my video. If you do, please do support my channel. Let me know if you've brought this book. Comment in the comments section. Let me know if you want to read it like this, or whether you're just hoping that they do individual hardbacks. We've got, what, X-Men Red coming out. So it's more those books near the end, I feel, that they need to be read by themselves. Because I think at that point, I wasn't like going from one issue to another. I was literally, I'm reading X-Men Red, and then I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to read the big event finale sort of thing. That's how I did it. But anyway, each their own. Thank you to those that have subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. Make sure you look after yourself. Very important these days. And as always, embrace geekiness. Take care. Goodbye.